So last week I talked about struggle, and I've had quite a week last week. It was really rather intense. I had a few kind of traumatic experiences myself. But I was reflecting and thinking about, like, what is the evolution from struggle? What is the evolution from when we're moving through hard times, whether it's emotionally, psychologically, physically? And I know that this time of year, the reason why I want to talk about it right now is I know that this time of year for some people can be a really hard, challenging time. And also, the winter always represents going more internal. It's meant to be a more internal time of hibernation, of reflection, of processing, digesting the entire year. And for me, I don't really follow the calendar year. I think that the new year comes more with the beginning of spring. So on March 21st, with the spring equinox, when we're really ready to emerge back into the world, this is the time of the digestion, of the processing, of the alchemizing, of the releasing what we no longer need, or at the very least, like just processing what we've gone through, because otherwise we're just in linear form, like full steam ahead. And I think a lot of people burn out at this time of year because we're going against the grain. We're meant to be slowing down. We're meant to be resting. These are the darkest, longest nights of the year. And people are like out like Christmas shopping and Christmas festivities. And, that can all be fun and magical, but nature has a very different rhythm. And if we want to really come into harmony and balance with ourselves, we have to learn, we have to remember again the rhythms of nature. But I want to talk today about the evolution from struggle. And actually, I was listening to a snippet of this woman talking about, and this is like scientifically proven, that normally what comes right after depression or struggle or suffering is actually a moment of awakening. It's a moving closer to awakening. And as we're going through this really huge mass collective shift and awakening, or what I would call remembering, it's no surprise that it's also bringing up a lot of stuff for people. Again, on all different levels. Some people are going through injury. Some people are going through illness. Some people are just going through emotional, like dealing with their emotional trauma. There's a lot of the shadow and of the really the suffering and the struggle that we've been in, or whatever story from our past, or it could be ancestral. A lot of it is coming up so that we can digest it, process it, and transmute it. But I thought it was so beautiful to hear that. So I want to talk about this progression of where this all leads us to, and how actually that's really beautiful when we trust the human process. So let's dive in. This is Corinne Bloom, and you're listening to Raw Conversations. So if any of you are familiar with the dark night of the soul, you're probably also familiar with the fact that when you come through the dark night of the soul, there's always like a leveling up. So the dark night of the soul, for those of you that don't know what that is, it's really a time where, at least I can say from my experience, it was like when I hit the bottom of the bottom. It's like a rock bottom moment where for me, it was like I lost faith in everything, even my relationship to the universe and just source existence. It was like I remember I was 27, I think, and I remember the moment I was lying on a really cold floor because I just had this little mattress. I was in an apartment, a shared apartment, living in Berlin in the middle of winter. And my God, if you ever know winter in Berlin, it will smack you in the face because it's so bloody cold there. But it was like the external was mimicking the internal was mimicking the external. And I remember just having, like, it was definitely my dark night of the soul. There were so many different things that I was going through. And it's like a reassessment of, what do I believe? Who do I believe myself to be? What do I believe about existence? This I am, the ego, the soul, the human, like God, source, the universe, all of it. I mean, really it is, often like, well, that mimicked my it fell into alignment with my Saturn return, which happens every around 27 years. But coming out of that, of course, I can see in hindsight, I mean, this was a long time ago, but that there was a huge illumination that came out of that. Like the following years were just huge, big shifts, exciting shifts. But, there's a process that transition takes. And sometimes these moments of, how do I want to talk about this? We really misconstrue a lot when it comes to emotions and feelings and cycles of being human. And I think we have a grave kind of misunderstanding of depression and struggle and suffering and emotions such as anger and sadness and depression, all of these things. There's kind of like a clinical response to things that I think sometimes loses, it's missing the soul, it's missing the heart, and it's kind of purely looking at it from the brain and from a chemical aspect of the brain, and it's very logical and rational, and it's very fragmented, in my opinion, rather than looking at something holistically, because I just believe that the body is so wise. It is such a brilliantly orchestrated, designed, I don't know, technology, some people say, like tool, equipment, whatever. I don't know. All these terms seem so cold, but, we're the human design is really a masterpiece. Sometimes really hard to deal with. Like, my God, just physical pain, like injury, chronic injury, illness, chronic illness. Like, I get migraines. My God, there are times where I'm just like, I'm done. This being in this human vessel, like, really feels crappy right now. And so it has that side of it. However, even with the pain, even with the suffering, even with the not knowing, and just sometimes the relentlessness of the pain and the suffering, and that can be physical, but it also can be emotional, right? Like emotions, when we don't understand our emotions and what our body is going through, it can be really difficult and challenging and painful and scary and debilitating. And yet there's always a wisdom, because there's always a message. There's always a message that comes through that our being is alerting us to. And it's all interconnected. When I go in and I do a kind of like a remote view soul reading on someone, and if I go into theta and I'm looking at what is going on in their life right now, but I'm looking at it kind of from the bird's eye view, from a soul perspective, and how everything is interconnected, there's always a reason. There's just always a reason. And so, like, even just, I don't want to continue too much on this point because I talked about it last week, but, if we're going through some kind of struggle or injury or illness or depression, or, we're getting irritable and angry all the time and frustrated all the time, if there's something that's happening, what if you were to look at it as, how is this working for me rather than to me? What is this communicating to me? What is it inviting me to look at, to turn towards? And all of it is actually in an act of love, because it's saying, hey, this is where you didn't love yourself, or this is where you haven't taken care of yourself. And it could be as simple as, I had some things happen to me last week, and it was very clear that it's like, okay, you need to, I know that I need to change some things in my life, and I'm trying to. So I've got a little bit of beef with the universe, because I'm like, okay, help me out. I can't do this anymore. It's literally killing me. Trying to, at least it seems. There's still just this, so that, I lost my train of thought. Even in small ways, something can come in that appears as a struggle or a pain or a suffering or an illness or an injury, because it's a redirect, or it's an invitation to ask, what do I need to change in my life? Be it like, I need to change my commute. I need to take a different way, or I need to move house, or I need to eat better, or I need to get a couple more hours extra sleep, or I need to say no to more things, whatever. There's always wisdom. There's always some kind of communication that's happening. And so when we look at it from a quote unquote more positive view of like, this isn't happening to me, this isn't any form of punishment, this isn't also just random, but there's actually a purpose to this. And if I look at it as, how can I work with this? How can I work with my body, with my being, with my oversoul, with my higher self, with source consciousness itself, that we're using the word with instead of against, and how that changes the perspective so greatly, because it takes us out of the victimization of what we're in and into the collaboration of how can we alchemize what needs to be alchemized, not through bypassing, not through getting rid of, but by actually turning towards and loving and embracing. And when we do that, that's what brings us to that precipice of like growing our wings. That's where the awakening, and it's so cool when you see kind of science back up spirituality, what spirituality has known for a long time, the mystics have known for a long time. But when science, for those that need the science to say, this is an actual thing, right? And that's great. Like, that's a really wonderful confirmation. And so what this woman was talking about is that when you connect the brain to I think it's an EEG, it picks up the energy at the back of the head. And apparently people that are depressed or going through some kind of suffering, there's a very high energy of, I think it's alpha. But there's this energy, this resonance that mirrors the Schumann's resonance. And the Schumann's resonance, if you don't know it, it's the resonance of nature. It's the resonance of the planet. And that is a scientific thing. It's not just woo-woo. And so it's like she was saying, it's like that when you're in the depression or the suffering or the struggle, it's like that part of your being that is reaching towards something. Because I don't know if you've had this experience, but when I reflect back on the moments in my life or the phases in my life where I felt depressed, right? I feel depressed right now. I'm putting myself into that moment. When I felt like I feel depressed in this moment, it wasn't something that was like a chemical thing. It was what was happening in my life. My spirit felt pressed down upon. I didn't feel liberated. I felt somehow imprisoned, or I felt like I wasn't expressing myself in the way that I knew my soul wanted to express itself. It didn't feel like I could be authentically free in the expression of that. Now, that might vary for everyone, right? I'm using the words expression because that's a really important thing for me, for my being to feel free. That's another really important thing for me. For you, it might be something different, but it's when we're not really in alignment with who we truly, truly are. And I'm mindful of using this word, but it's like when we don't feel like we're in our potential, or when we don't feel like we're in our purpose, or when things don't feel meaningful in our lives, or we're in relationships that don't serve us, or we're in a job that doesn't serve us, and it doesn't make us feel alive and fulfilled and happy and grateful. And that then what happens is that the body brings in certain things to make us recognize, I'm not happy right now, or I'm not in my fullest potential, or I'm not in alignment, I'm not in harmony with whatever it is. And it's not to blame the external. It's really a cue to go, what in me do I need to let out of the cage, so to speak? What part of me feels like it's being held back or hindered, or in what ways am I not loving myself? In what ways am I not seeing or hearing or understanding myself? In what ways am I not supporting myself? In what ways is there still shame or blame or lack of worth? It could be a multitude of things. I'm just throwing out some of the ones that I hear the most. It's all an invitation to inquire into us. And the reason why the body is so well designed that it comes up with various cues to say, hey, like knock, 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 you need to look inside of yourself right now, is because otherwise you just plow ahead and you would not know why things don't feel quite right. You would not know why you don't feel happy or fulfilled or at peace. So, the knock in the beginning is very subtle, right? It can just be a whisper. Then it might get a little bit louder. There's like the real knock on the door. And then as, I forget, it was some woman in a documentary, the documentary, It's Time. I haven't finished watching it actually, but one of the people being interviewed was saying, if you don't listen to the first couple things, so I don't remember exactly what she said, but it's kind of like the whisper, the knock of the door, then comes the hammer. And the hammer is the much more extreme version of suffering and struggle that really gets your attention. So everything is in communication. And when you spend more time with yourself every day, I like to call it being with. Some people call it meditation, but sometimes you use the word meditation, people get a little bit like, I don't know how to do it, or I'm doing it wrong, or I can't stop thinking, or can't have thoughts. And, of course, there are techniques to meditation, but I really like using the term being with. You're just sitting in silence, in stillness, and being with yourself. Being with your breath, being with the sensations in your body, being with your emotions, being with your thoughts, noticing where they take you, and then coming back. Not because going there is bad, but it's like this invitation to keep on coming back home, keep on coming back home, keep on coming back to who you know yourself to be. And the more you sit in meditation, the more you get to know who you are, because we only get to know ourselves when we're quiet and when we're still. Because it's in the finesse, in the nuance of just the energy. We are energetic beings. We're beings of vibration. This body brings us into a density where we can see, we have a physical vessel, but we are not this, right? And if its frequency is buzzing at such a high rate that it creates this like simulation of like being solid, right? But we're actually just a bunch of just particles of energy. So we have to sit with that energy to really, truly get to know the essence of who we are. And I think it's so fascinating that, what this woman was saying, that science has confirmed now, is that when people are in depression or struggle or suffering, that they're reaching for, I love this word, that it was reaching for something else. It was reaching for the awakening, because it's like the being is saying, I know there's more to life than this. I know there's more to me than this. Often if we get stuck in ruts and routines and we're not really living our potential, and what I mean by potential is it's not something that you're measured by that makes you worthy or doesn't, or you're not worthy. It's your passion. It's what you love to do. That's your potential. Your potential is who you are when you feel free and when you feel authentic and enlivened and you're doing and being and living what you love. That's your potential. It's not a degree. It's not a certification. It's not how well you're going to be measured or, by society. Your potential is you in your most enlivened state. And so if we're not living a life, and here's the thing, sometimes actually it takes risk. And I was having this conversation with these beautiful women that I met at the sea today, that, one of them was saying, like, she had to really work. I said that I was an authenticity coach, and she was saying, God, it's so important. It's like one of the most important things is to be authentically who we are. But how hard that can be sometimes, how scary that can be sometimes, because we have to come up against our own judgment. We have to come up against our fear of what others think, right? Or maybe it's competition, or maybe it's that you don't feel good enough, or that something's wrong with you, or you're not doing it right. And, society is so upside down and inside out. It doesn't, it's really not supportive of our true nature. But there's a lot that we have to move through because we are afraid of being rejected ultimately and not belonging to the tribe. And sometimes when we go on this, journey of I'm going to really be who I am, it's like, well, what if I really am who I am and nobody likes me, right? That's the fear that I see come up a lot. And of course, it reflects the inner of in what way are you not liking you? If you're afraid of others judging you, in what way are you judging you? If you're afraid of, comparing yourself to others, what part of you feels like you're not good enough so that you have to compare, right? Why even is there a comparison? Because if we come from the perspective of I'm whole, I'm worthy, I'm good enough, I am lovable, I'm significant, I am uniquely me, and I get to be uniquely me. I don't have to be this homogenized cookie cutter citizen that society wants me to be, right? That wants us draw within the lines, No, screw that. Draw way outside of the line and use any color you damn want, right? So we're not in a culture currently that supports that. And so a lot of people have a lot of fear. And, the body at a certain point might come in and say, hey, you're not being true to yourself. You're not being true to yourself. And part of being true to yourself is loving all parts of yourself, not pushing down or suppressing or quietening. There's a lot around, really, especially for women, but also for men, there's a lot around using our voice, having a voice. It's also ancestral, right? Because there's a lot of, past life trauma that we often remember. But that's something I had to definitely work through, was my, moving through my throat chakra, my fifth chakra. And I used to have really swollen glands and had mononucleosis when I was 18. And I had to really learn that it's okay to have a voice. Or, when I had my injury, it was I had an ankle injury when I was a professional ballet dancer. And it was really, it was on the masculine side of my body. And there's a whole story around that. But what it taught me was to really be on 2 feet and be really grounded and connected and at home within myself. And that any action I took, it was for me, not for anyone else. So, anything that arises, and like I said, when I go up into kind of a remote view soul reading perspective, I can see the reasons. I can see what at least wants to be shown, right? What wants to be seen. And I think this is really helpful because what it's doing is it might feel like it's a hindrance. It might feel like it's an obstacle. It might feel like it's literally killing you. But it's always, always, always an invitation to come closer to who you are, to who you truly are in the most liberated, authentic, unique, loving, and loved way possible. So none of it is ever a punishment. All of it is come closer to who you are and be who you truly are and let that shine within you. And that, I think, is the part that is reaching towards the next level of awakening. The soul is constantly in evolution, in a spiraling in and spiraling out form and cycle, because that's growth, right? And sometimes we have to spiral in to then be kind of reborn to spiral back out. And that whole process is an evolution, is a growth. So I think we're going through this individually, but we're most certainly going through this collectively. And so don't doubt or don't despair if you're going through a hard time right now, whether it's a dark night of the soul, whether it's just a huge physical challenge, or your emotional trauma is coming up, or you're just going through a hard time and life is hard. It's hard to make ends meet and you're tired and you're exasperated and you're fed up and, you kind of want to go on to the next phase. Don't despair, because what if you were to look at it from the perspective that your soul is actually wanting to expand now? Because these moments can feel so contracting, right? They can feel so contracted, especially if we're in pain or fatigue or frustration. It can feel so contracting. But if you can soften into it and really trust, really profoundly trust, this is here for a reason. What is it showing me? What is it communicating? And if we see that maybe our being is wanting to reach for that next level of evolution, and the next level of evolution can only come through authenticity. It can only come, well, I say only, maybe it's not only, but a huge way to get there is through authenticity, because authenticity means you are being true to you. You are honoring you. You are respecting you. You are loving and embracing you, all of you. That's authenticity to me. You get to be who you are without shame, without judgment, without severing parts of yourself. You get to return to the wholeness of who you are, and you get to relax and let the metaphoric belly hang out over your trousers and just enjoy and be grateful for the unique being that you are. There was a beautiful quote that I came across today, and I can't remember it word for word, but it was something like, it used the word God. So if that triggers you, you can, replace it with a different word, source, universe. How beautiful it is that God, made all of, the universe, the galaxy, the stars, the moon, the sun, the trees, the mountains, all of these things, and then thought how important it is to add you into it. Like that you are also uniquely a part of that creation, along with the stars and the moon and the sun and all of these things. And I thought that's so beautiful. Because we're taught that we're not important, because we're kind of taught that if you appreciate yourself, oh, well, then you're vain, and we're in a society that breeds you're not enough, right? And sometimes the opposite of not enough is a kind of vanity, right? But vanity often comes from an insecurity, right? It's the other side of that coin. We're actually, what we're needing to remember is to really appreciate. Who doesn't want to be appreciated in relationship, right? But to really learn to appreciate ourselves, to really love and value who we uniquely are as the unique drop that is part of the greater ocean. But you are a unique drop. You are a unique soul. And you're not meant to be like anyone else. Sure, we share similarities. Of course we do. We're all cut from the same cloth, right? But you have your unique fingerprint, imprint. You're unique, no iris of the eye is the same. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. We are all individually just a masterpiece. An art of creation. And we forget this, and we're often not told to remember it, right? So it's really easy in this world. It's all too easy to get into what's wrong and what's not working and the struggle and the suffering. And, these times have been unrelenting. These last 5 years have been like hardcore. I think what we're moving through in a matter of years is what, normally happens over hundreds, if not thousands of years and many lifetimes, right? So it's intense, and time is speeding up, and it feels like this horse that's just like da-da-dun, 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 da-da-dun. And this is a moment within that to just pause. Just pause and be with yourself. And can you take a moment to appreciate you? I don't care what more you feel like you have to do that's on your to-do list, or that's even something that you're like, but I want to work on this part of me, and this part needs to improve or evolve or get better, or what. For now, don't think about what more you need to do, and just appreciate who you are right now. And sometimes just the great courage it takes to just be human. It's not always easy, right? But appreciate who you are. Appreciate what you have to uniquely bring to this world. Because if you didn't have something uniquely to bring, and I don't mean that means you have to do this and achieve that and then you're worthy. I mean, your very presence has purpose. There is a reason why you are here. And even if, there is the sad case where a lot of people feel like, well, my parents never supported me. My teachers never supported me. I feel isolated and alone. Nobody tells me that I'm loved or appreciated. You are still appreciated through the eyes of your soul, through the eyes of Source, Universe, God, whatever you want to call it. And, you have no idea the effect that you might have on people just simply by walking down the street. And especially those of us that are really wanting to live from heart, just being you, being authentic, being honest, having integrity, living from your heart, being as kind as possible, being as true as possible. The energetic effect of that is so immense, you have no idea. And it's like the butterfly effect, right? That a butterfly, well, quantum entanglement, I guess, that a butterfly can flap its wings on one side of the universe and it will be felt on the other, right? We're learning more and more how interconnected we are. We're moving more and more into the quantum, and we're going to start feeling it. If you haven't already, you're going to start feeling it soon, right? But we have to know that we matter, not so that we become these grandiose, vain people, but actually that we step into our worth. Because having a society of people that don't believe that they're worthy and good enough, look at what it's creating. We need to remember to respect and honor and appreciate and value and love ourselves, because we are incredible beings. So really, if anything that this podcast is conveying to you is remember who you are. Look at yourself in the mirror. And I don't care how haggard you feel. Look at yourself in the mirror. Can you tell yourself I appreciate you. I love you. You're beautiful. God, you're so courageous. I'm so proud of you. We need to remember how to really honor ourselves and bow down to ourselves, because the more that we can do that and we feel well again within ourselves, and we start to change the perspective of how we view struggle and suffering and depression and illness and injury, and work with ourselves as a means to move closer to who we truly are in our essence, and also to continue to grow and evolve. And there is no succeeding or failing. There's no way that you can get this wrong. There's no judgment. There's no grading. There's no exam to be had, right? This is between you and you and source. So really the invitation for today is, whatever is going on in your life, how is it working for you? How can you work with it? And how can you work with it in a way where you're really valuing and appreciating who you are? Don't underestimate who you are. Give yourself credit. And we're expanding, and consciousness is expanding, and we're remembering again. We've been, humanity has really been held under the thumb, keeping us from what that thumb has known is just immense potential. Immense potential. And so we've been dumbed down and numbed down and suppressed and all of these things. And we're waking up. And it's beautiful. And recognize that if you're in a state of struggle, you might be shedding and releasing and purging and letting go of the shackles, right? Whether it's yours or your ancestors or collective, you're letting go, you're releasing the shackles, and you're ultimately liberating yourself. As long as you stay true, you listen, you come from a place of love, and you find the courage in your heart to keep on going in that direction. Don't let it swallow you down and under, but that it's still a point of evolution, of growth. The seed can only grow in the dark. It needs to be in the darkness of the soil. So if you're in the moment of the struggle and the depression and the despair and the illness and the injury, you're getting closer to the light because you're in the growth process. As long as you can stay conscious with it, aware with it, so that you're not consumed and falling asleep to it, but as long as you can be conscious with it, how is this working with me? How is this working for me? What do I need to see here? What am I learning? What am I healing? What am I evolving and transmuting and alchemizing right now? The shoot will pop through the soil, and you're going to see the light. And that's when we come out of the dark night of the soul, and we come into a state of illumination and enlightenment, because we're coming more into the light of who we are. And this might happen several times over in your life because we're cyclical, right? And so when we might have grown and evolved and then we hit another kind of plateau, there's another winter of our cycle, right? Of our evolution. And then we go through it again. But every time, I will get through this. It's working for me, not against me. I'm working with it, not against it. Does that make sense? I hope so. So yeah, the invitation today is just to ask yourself these questions and to see, what are you reaching for? What is it that's wanting to emerge through you? What is wanting to be liberated? What is wanting to be seen and heard and understood and valued and loved? Ask yourself these questions and see what comes out, and trust it, follow it. You are having a conversation with you, your body, your ego, and most importantly, your soul. So I hope that's helpful. As always, take it or leave it as feels right for you, and loving you from afar. You've been listening to Raw Conversations with Corinne Bloom. Thanks so much for showing up, listening in, and being a part of the conversation with me.